Welcome back to the Mediocre Alaskan podcast. I'm here with Taylor Balkom via the Zoom. Taylor was a freelance photographer, or is a freelance photographer. Used to work for the Ketchikan Daily News. How long were you up here for that?
I was up there for 3 years.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Talk a little photography here. Before we get too far in, I noticed you're wearing an LSU hooded sweatshirt.
Of course.
National. So Burrow's out with ACL, MCL.
Yep. I knew the Bengals were going to do that to him. I could just feel it the second first game.
Yeah. Do you follow LSU players as they go, or once they graduate / leave, or is that kind of the end of your following of LSU folks?
I would say once I attended LSU, that's when I started really following the players when they went to the NFL. But before that, like growing up, I didn't really care that much, especially with the 2019 team. All those guys like Joe and Clyde, Edwards-Helaire for the Chiefs, and Justin Jefferson for the Vikings, like they're all contributing so early that I kind of keep tabs on what they're doing.
Yeah. I went to University of Arizona, and so basketball was my big thing. One of the reasons I went there is because the guys that played there in the 90s, and I just wanted to be like a D1 fan. Just go to the McHale Center and just be a part of that whole thing.
Yeah.
Was that part of why you went to LSU?
I mean, a little bit. I grew up in Baton Rouge, so I was pretty much from birth going to go to LSU. That's the only college I applied for out of high school. So, yeah.
Do you think you went into? I got a degree in journalism from U of A, and photography is kind of what you want to do. Do you think there's an advantage to going to a big D1 sport type school for journalism or photojournalism?
Oh, definitely. I mean, LSU doesn't have a photojournalism specific program, which was kind of disappointing. But I had heard from people I had interviewed with that they really liked that I had D1 sports experience when I was applying for jobs after college.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that some people go to certain schools for journalism, for photojournalism, for engineering, whatever? Do you think there's a difference between going to the school, getting that degree, or going to D1 school and then taking advantage of opportunities? U of A was a decent journalism school, but had a really good student-run newspaper. So if you left with a degree, that meant a lot less than if you worked for the paper. So what's the difference between getting experience versus just the degree?
I think that unfortunately in media, people just don't respect student newspapers. Like, the Reveille or the Daily, it was the Daily Reveille at the time that I was there. We won SPJ, the Society of Professional Journalism's like best student newspaper one of the years that I was there. And as far as I could tell, no one at a real newspaper cared. And I don't know if it's just like some inherent bias towards like the elite journalism schools like Columbia or Mizzou or, something like that. But I definitely got the impression that no one was like, no one cared that I had all this college newspaper experience because they're not viewed as real legitimate newspapers to work at. So like internships at other outlets are a lot more valuable than a degree from, not a top tier journalism school, I think.
I think part of the perception is you go to school, you earn the degree, and then people are just going to throw jobs at you because you have the degree. But it's like you said, those internships, the real experience and how prepared you are for the real world. So what was your first job out of college? Was it KDN?
It was KDN, yeah. I started applying, pretty heavily, I think the December before I graduated, and just, through applications at anything I saw anywhere. I know I wanted to get out of my hometown, for a little bit at least. And the Ketchikan Daily News is the only paper that I even interviewed with, I think. And then, just immediately accepted it and moved up a month after the interview, I think.
Nice. Did you feel that you were a photographer before that, or did the first job signify that? I know certain people, they kind of have hobbies or they get jobs, but they don't really consider themselves that until they, have worked in the field for a little bit. So what point did you say, I'm a photographer?
I think I felt that in college just because I shot, I was a writer on the newspaper for like a year and a half before I transitioned to full-time photography. And once I was a staff photographer, then I was photo editor for a semester and chief photographer for a semester. And I just I shot hundreds of thousands of frames over those like 3 years. I would say that I definitely felt like a photographer before I got my first, adult paying job. Yeah.
So you said that you were a writer too. How important is it to be able to do the journalism written piece as well as the photo? I try to convince kids who want to go into photography said, if you can also write a recap or a preview, or if you can write along with that, that's going to be huge. So how important is that along with being a photographer?
Oh, I think it's what you have to do at this point. Just because there's so few dedicated photo jobs in the industry now that if you can, go to a volleyball game and take photos and also do a quick gamer, that saves your newspaper some money, be it through the sports writer that they laid off, but saves them a little bit money and makes you a lot more attractive of a candidate. And also photographers notoriously are terrible at writing captions, and like some of the most important info in a story is, describing what is happening in the photo in a caption. And some of the photographers I worked with at my student newspaper just couldn't string coherent sentences together in captioning.
Yeah.
It was incredibly annoying. That's super important.
At the U of A paper, we had some journalism majors who just kind of specialized in the photography piece, which was great because, they knew they'd taken your journalism classes and they understood the who, what, when, where, why, how, and, they had important information. And some of the other people just kind of liked it as a hobby.
Yeah.
Getting them to show up on time, understand what's going on. Hey, from the writer piece, I'd set up a photo shoot for a feature with one of the players, and they wouldn't know what made sense for basketball or what made sense for football. And so you'd get like an artsy photo of football, which didn't really make any sort of sense. But
Yeah.
who had some background and journalistic background, you got some good photos there. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you develop your photo style and your eye for what makes a good photo? You said you looked at hundreds of thousands of photos. So how do you know what works, how to plan for it, and what makes a good photo?
Really, I guess trial and error in the beginning, because I think that's why the experience, even though it's not valued a lot, maybe once you graduate, the experience of shooting for your student newspaper and going to shoot a football game or whatever, and maybe taking an artsy photo that the editor is not really going to want for the story, and then learning that, and then you kind of know more of what your newspaper wants to look for. I think that criticism and that feedback is super important to developing your own style in the beginning, just so you what people are going to be looking for certain stories. For my style specifically, I really have no idea where. I don't even know if I have a style yet. I feel like my career's young enough to where maybe people don't know that they're looking at one of my photos the second they look at it. But I was super lucky in Ketchikan to hang out with Hall Anderson pretty much every day, and he was a really great mentor to have to kind of guide me towards fixing some things that I did early on in my career that that didn't make for super compelling photography. That feedback is really the most essential thing, I think.
What were some of the things that you needed to improve on or that he suggested?
Cropping was the big one. I liked a lot of loose crops, and it was kind of like a stylistic thing at the Daily News, because my student paper, we did a lot of big wide photos with a lot of negative space where you could put like text over it.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't the style at the Daily News. So I had to really learn how to crop super tight in on my shots, especially like sports action shots. You know, if there's not a tight crop showing you exactly where you need to be looking, then the shot is kind of a waste almost.
Yeah. I taught journalism in California or yearbook in journalism for, I don't know how, it's just a nightmare because the whole budget part and the publishing the paper, I hated that. Or the yearbook, I hated that part. I like the photography part though. And I've never been much of a photographer, but you kind of know what you like. And look, opening the first couple pages of like the Sports Illustrated or something like that, you see those pictures that have emotion, right? And there's an emotion, there's something that your eye goes right to where the photographer wants you to take that. And then there's the others that you pan out and you get, a wide angle view of what's going on there. How many of those do you get wrong where you're like, oh, I should have panned out on this one, or I should have zoomed in more of this one, or if I would have done this right, I wouldn't have had to crop?
Yeah. Oh, I constantly, it's whether it's if only I had a couple 100 millimeters on the end of my zoom, I wouldn't have had to crop this photo. I would have had, more detail in the shot. That's probably the most frustrating thing just about going back and prepping after an assignment is immediately, or at least I am. I don't know if it's the rule for everybody, but immediately you're just like, oh, well, I should have taken a couple steps closer here. I should have zoomed out more. I didn't notice that this light pole intersected this person's head in a weird way. Now the shot's ruined. I'm a terrible photographer. It just just spirals like that.
Well, how does, everybody that does or pursues something that they love, they have those moments of self-doubt or imposter syndrome, or where they just feel inadequate or wrong. How do you get past that? Because that's what prevents a lot of people from going forward. There's like students who want to be photographers, but as soon as you tell them, hey, okay, anybody can take a picture of an eagle, that's easy. Anybody can take senior photos down at the beach because that's Alaska showing off for you. Mm-hmm. So how do you take that criticism or take that negativity or take that self-doubt and then take your breath and go on the next assignment and move on?
It's tough. That's imposter syndrome is something that I definitely have struggled with in the past and struggle with today, especially with the pandemic and so many people getting laid off and so many opportunities being lost that, I have not worked much really since this all started. And, that definitely feeds into my, this creeping self-doubt, like, oh, I'm a fraud. They're finally catching on. Obviously the quickest way to remedy that is to get some work, but that's not always possible. So I guess when I'm really feeling that, I'll just kind of go on a walk, get somewhere quiet, take my camera, just take a photo of something, like just, use your skill to some degree to take a photo just for you. You don't really have to show it to anybody. Don't post it on Instagram because, that's another negative reinforcement often is like, oh, this only got 5 likes. This shot is terrible. Clearly, that's not always the case. But yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing that pretty much every single photographer I know struggles with.
I'm a little bit older than you. I finished college in the early 2000s, but part of me looks back at what like outdoor writing was. If I look at my freelance writing perspective and not the teaching perspective, I look back at that and it seems like things were a lot less complicated because you didn't have to do the social media thing, or there wasn't that, so many people that could just put content out there and it wasn't saturated with content. Mm-hmm. Do you look back at what photography was and think, man, it would be nice because I know how to shoot good photos. I know, I'm not out here with a camera that I bought that has a really good factory setting and I'm an amateur that can make it work. Do you look back at the way photography was and kind of wish that some of those elements were still there?
I guess mostly just from a health of the industry standpoint, I do. Cause, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, newspapers had not the Ketchikan Daily News, but like, bigger metro papers had 10 or 15 photographers on staff, and there was just so much more opportunity then to get paid for work. Whereas now, like you said, everyone's got a camera, everyone's just posting everything they see on the internet for free usually. And news organizations have discovered that we don't have to pay a freelancer to go out to this crime scene. Someone was there and live streamed the whole thing. We'll just ask them if we can use the video, and they'll usually say yes, and then we could just we saved $1. So I think that's really the only I don't really yearn for the days of like film photography, because that sounded like a major pain to have to deal with all of that. As cool as film looks, it's so much easier on digital. I can't imagine. I was talking to Charlie Starr once when I was in Ketchikan, a photographer up there, and he was talking about, I believe he used to work for the San Diego Tribune, I want to say. And he was telling me how they would have to transmit photos, like, take the photos, develop the photos, make a small print, or maybe they sent over the 35 millimeter rolls or whatever, and then like go back to your hotel room, and there was this old like hand crank transmitter that like faxed the image essentially back to the newsroom, and that was how you had to get in shots before deadline. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
You used to have to be so good. I look back at some of those just old images and you appreciate that. Like, you had to know exactly what you were shooting. You could spend a whole roll on, well, I'm not sure, it could be so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There was just it didn't happen. And so you had to be so good at it. And do you think there's going to be some bit of a correction in the photography and then even content world? Because people are pushing out words that are just words. They're not necessarily the right words. You're getting a lot of images out there, but they're not necessarily the right images. Do you think that we as a consuming culture will demand better product? Or do you think that the on-the-spot amateur thing is going to continue to undercut the journalism and photojournalism world?
I sure hope we correct towards that, because otherwise I may be out of a job soon. Yeah, I don't know, what has to happen to get people to appreciate, because people appreciate good photos over, mediocre photos, even if they're not aware of it. Their brain appreciates a nice intentional photo over, some throwaway shot from someone's cell phone or whatever. I just don't know if what's going to have to happen for them to be willing to pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the tough thing going forward, because there's always someone willing to do it for free. And the element of the honor of having your thing published. I sent an article to a magazine, and I told them in the letter, I said, hey, I'm a freelance journalist. I've been published before, so that was kind of the, hey, this is something that I do. This isn't just a reader thing, whatever. And they ended up publishing it without even telling me. And then they, this is like 5 months later, I said, did you get a chance to look at that? So, oh yeah, we published it under our readers submitted stories.
Oh my God.
So not only did they not tell me they published it, but they also published it in that area where they could get away with publishing it without paying. Because there's always people who are out there who are willing to have the honor of having their thing published, and that's good enough for them. But it ends up being free content. I was like, that is absolutely terrible.
Yeah, they stole your column.
Yeah, and I didn't specifically say, hey, I would like to get paid for this, but I thought the assumption was, if I'm a freelance writer and I write a column for the Juneau Empire, that hey, this guy's used to getting paid. We should probably pay him for this. That was pretty jacked up, but
yeah.
I don't know. I really wish that we would maybe correct, but I'm right there with you that there's always someone willing to just get the byline or just get the honor of having your name by the picture. But if it's good enough, you should get paid for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when you do work for free, it immediately devalues the work of everyone else trying to do the same thing as you. But like also reinforcing that is just the fact that there's not as many opportunities anymore. So like, if you want to break into the industry, at some point you're probably going to have to shoot something for free, excuse me, and or write something for free or little to no money, and it's just an awful cycle, and I don't know how to get out of it.
No, it's weird. They say the best, when I was trying to get a start in the freelance world, they were saying the best thing to get published is to have been published. And like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how do you start? But that's kind of how it is.
There was a photographer. She used to work for the Seattle Times. Now she's a freelancer for Getty Images. And someone asked her, how do I become a Getty photographer? And she was like, honestly, work for the Seattle Times, work for another big paper first, because that's kind of the only hired.
Yeah. I feel like I've kind of like led us down a depressing road.
Oh no, it's fine.
Know the audience a little bit here, like, that's
most conversations about journalism in 2020 lead there eventually.
Yeah, having a journalism degree and then teaching journalism. I've been trying to pitch the angle of being able to think and write college essays for English classes, because the journalism world is such a negative one right now. People don't trust the media, and it's you're either on this side or you're on this side, but either way it's bad. It's not like a noble profession. So part of I'm training kids to do the more writing piece, and we talk a little bit about some of the current events, but for the most part it's just do the craft of journalism and do that well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough out there in multiple ways. Have you thought about teaching or anything like that? Or
people, I feel like everyone's backup plan is teacher. It's like the famous, I don't know if it's famous, but the saying that I heard a bunch is everyone's backup plan is being a teacher. I would think I would be okay with that, but like I don't think I would be looking to leave the industry anytime soon. At least not now.
Yeah, I learned that pretty early on. It was like, if you can, you will. If you can't, then you teach. And I was like, oh,
right.
That's fucked up. There was a moment for me, because I was in my second semester of my senior year in college, and Arizona just lost in the no, that's my junior year. Yeah, junior year. No, senior year. And Arizona just lost the NCAA tournament, and then I'm reading the recap, and I'm just seeing the look on the people's faces who they do this for a career. And it was almost like, do I want to do this? Do I want to follow around a team? And this is going to be the end of kind of my writing season about basketball. I love basketball, and I love Arizona basketball. So that would be the peak of journalistic existence, me covering the Arizona men's basketball team. But then, and this was when they were really good. Now they're like, whatever. This was when they were perennial powerhouse. And I thought, oh my gosh, in order to get to this point, there are a lot of steps. And, some of the people who are in the industry, it seemed like there was, they were upset that their dreams as a player didn't work out. And so they were bent on finding the angle, to kind of just, twist the knife or whatever. They were, I don't know, just kind of a weird feeling. And so at that point I was like, I don't think I want to do this career. And so I went into teaching, and then I was like, oh, I actually like writing a lot. And I like writing about outdoor type stuff. And so it was good for me that I ended up not going the sports writing, because I found out that I like the outdoor on my own terms type. So have you found that there's a freedom in being able to do what you want as far as photography goes?
Yeah. I mean, it is nice to, as a freelancer, to just, set your own schedule. You, in theory, have the luxury of only taking the assignments that you want, only shooting the things you want to shoot. In practice, I don't think I've gotten that luxury assignments. But yeah, I think that's why I've sports so much here in Oregon, where I live now. I have pretty much exclusively covered high school sports, and it's great because I love high school sports specifically, just because, as awesome as it is to shoot college and pro, there's so much more freedom in covering prep sports because, excuse me, it's a bunch of kids, and security is not, super controlling the field. Like, when you're shooting an LSU game, you're only allowed to take photos between the 30-yard line and the end zone and all this other stuff, and you can't go up into the stands. It was at a college game, you can do laps around the field the whole game if you want, go up in the stands, go wherever you want, take photos. It's and that opens up just so many more creative opportunities for art that that aspect is definitely nice, that I can so far kind of pre-coronavirus pandemic sustain myself on just taking photos of high school sports.
Yeah. That's, you listen to podcasts about just anybody. They talk about how when they're terrible at something, but they love that they've made it through and they have the freedom to do things on their own terms. And that is something that, like, I can kind of teach on my own terms, but there's obviously professional parameters. When I get to write about what I want, which is great, but that's not my main career. That's like a side gig.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. I think that's the being able to battle through those lean spots, to be able to come out on the other end fortified and better at your craft, because you have to decide now, am I going to go through this? And okay, I mean, it's worth it. And I think that's great. That's admirable. That's kind of the dream. You go through it, you appreciate it more, you hone your craft. And then you come out and you're doing the stuff that most people gave up on, most people quit. Have you been forced to look at ways to diversify, shooting photos that you would not have shot maybe 3-4 years ago, that now you're like, okay, I gotta diversify, get a little better?
Yeah, definitely. I think that in an ideal world, maybe I wouldn't be, taking photos of, some like mid-season volleyball game, like 4 nights a week, like I was, no offense to volleyball, but, that assignment specifically is maybe not one I would like to be doing as much as I have been forced to do it, just by the parameters of of the freelance industry right now. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't remember what the rest of your question was.
Diversifying it and growing in the
Oh,
craft.
yeah.
Uh,
And
Go ahead.
one way I've been trying to diversify is I really want to get into drone photography, because that's, I think, and been a big thing in newspapers, is like drone shots and video work. Photographers are not expected to just take still photos anymore. They pretty much always have to do video, and that is something that I did a little bit in Ketchikan, but have not really had the opportunity to get paid to do since then. So I haven't done it because I'm not getting paid for it. But I think that's right now is probably my biggest personal handicap, is just not having a lot of video experience. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely something I definitely need to expand the areas of visual journalism that I am proficient in.
What's the turnaround time if you make a submission for either a photo or a series or something like that? Because I've sent book proposals, and I'm currently waiting for one back. I sent it out in June, and they said, "Oh, give us up to 6 months." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, 6
Christ!"
Or sometimes you'll send something in, and they just don't get back to you. So like you get your no in the form of no response, but you can't simultaneously submit to other publications. So you got to wait for that one to come back, and so by the time they get back to you with the no, or they never get back to you, and a month has passed. So how do you deal with that waiting time in between? And is it shorter, or is it what's it like for the photographer?
For photo, it's usually pretty fast. You'll either get I for newspapers I shoot for here, I go out when they tell me to on assignment. I'm not like taking photos of something and then submitting it and trying to get that published for the most part. So the feedback is almost immediately like, yes, these are good, we can use these, or no. If I'm reaching out to a publication to see if, basically like offering my services to them, or, pitching a story idea or a photo story idea or anything, that is usually radio silence for forever. I've never really gotten oh yeah, hey, excuse me. I've never gotten like an immediate, oh yes, we're very interested, can we contact you? It's always, 2-3 weeks of nothing, and then a no, or months, and then they're like, oh yeah, we filled that opening or whatever 3 weeks ago.
I hate that waiting part. Like, just send me an email that says, hey, we got it, and we'll let you know.
Oh yeah,
it's just hard to, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating, but
extremely.
Yeah. So what's the plan? What's the looking forward? Like, what would be if things work out perfectly? What does that look like? In my world, from my perspective, I sell the book that I wrote, and I start. I get like a 2 or 3 book contract. So I'm working on a series of outdoor fishing, hunting. And so I can pay the bills if I want through writing books. That's the ultimate dream. I'm not even at step 1 right now. I submitted something that's radio silence. So where are you at? What's the dream for you?
I really haven't thought about like long-term, like a definitive goal, I guess, in this industry. I kind of, which is probably a problem, but I would like to, I guess, in the more short term, I really do not like freelancing. The inconsistent pay and the radio silence from editors, cold pitching people, can't stand it. So ideally, I would get a staff job at maybe a mid-size paper somewhere. That was my intention whenever I left Ketchikan, was to freelance in New York. I moved from Ketchikan to New York City, freelance in New York City for a little bit, and then, parlay that into a full-time job at a paper bigger than the Ketchikan Daily News. And that just has not happened yet. So I guess that's the step I'm waiting on. I'd love to return to Alaska at some point. I know the Empire doesn't have a staff photographer position anymore or right now. But I like that paper. The Anchorage Daily News has a bunch of super talented photographers. I would love to work for the Anchorage Daily News. I'd love to live in Anchorage. That sounds like a great time. Yeah. Those are my short to mid range goals, I guess.
Well, I think that you're in that spot, man. Again, listening to podcasts, reading what people say, just people who get to where they want to be. Like, everybody goes through. You only hear about the story on the back end, right?
Mm-hmm.
They only somewhat touch on the fact that, hey, man, this sucked. I went to LA and I had no money, or I was doing that. I can't remember if it was a Joe Rogan podcast or someone. They were saying that the overnight success in LA takes 10 years. So it's 10 years of just nothing.
Right.
But again, coming out on the back end of that, because you're still pursuing it. You haven't given up. So that's great, man. I wish you the best of luck. I know it's probably not the greatest thing to be talking about given the situation here. But I like the photos that you take, man. Follow you on Instagram, and I just like that emotion. It's something that's so different at the high school level, because there's no high school kid that like knows where the cameras are.
Right.
You get that at the college level, and certainly at the pro level. They know that there's cameras on them, so you get this representation of the emotion. But that high school sport, man, you can't fake that, and that's pretty sweet. So
yeah, it's uncut, that emotion.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you got as far as closing thoughts about the tips for photographers, or the freelance game, or what do you got for a closing thought here?
Oh man. I guess they always say the best camera is the one you have on you. So even if all you have is a phone, you can take good phone photos. Everyone, at least in the industry, makes fun of reporters with cell phones and people with, iPads taking photos of stuff, which, I still strongly advise against using an iPad for photography. But yeah, just go out and shoot. That's the only way to find out if you've got it and if you like it, and then share that work. Maybe not on social media, because you rarely get constructive criticism there, but share that work with your family, your friends, mentors, people you got to. They'll, anyone listening can feel free to send me their work, and I'll give them my thoughts on it. And just get constructive criticism. That's the fastest way to grow as a photographer, and probably as a person also.
Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate what you do. Stick with it. Better days are ahead, man. Appreciate your attitude. Appreciate the work.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.